University. And that is actually it in terms of the education that I have received. I do have 4 children, and let's just say it's all been very interesting trying to get a degree and raising the kids at the same time.
Okay, fantastic. So you both have 4 kids. Why did you go to college? Whoever would like to answer the question first. And did your kids play any role in your decision to go to college?
Go ahead.
You want me to go first? Oh, I needed a whole life change. Being a single mother with 4 kids, what I was doing previously was just not working. And I also had aspirations of doing something different. And I just finally decided, hey, I need to go ahead and do this. And when the opportunity arose for me to return to college, I jumped in head first and just took off with it.
So you started college before and then finished college later.
Yeah, I started college right after high school. Went for maybe 2 or 3 semesters and then decided I wanted to do something different. So I went to technical school and became a cosmetologist. And I did that for 14 years. And I just really felt called to do more to help people. And the helping field was really where I wanted to be. So in my mid 30s, I decided to return to college with 4 kids in tow.
Okay.
Well, I mean, for me, it's if you had asked me this question probably some time back, I would have had a different answer than I have now. I mean, it's just one of those things to where I started, it was the thing to do. You graduate from high school and you kind of try and find your way. And by going to college, it was sort of like that thing, that next step that you take. I didn't complete college. I just sort of was in and out of it. And then at some point, once I actually got my career going, is when I felt a little bit more calmer in my life to go back to college and complete my degree. So it's just a lot of different episodes in between that sort of starts in terms of, getting the degree finally.
So you both started college right after high school. Did finances play a role in you not going all the way through right after high school, or was it just like life circumstances changed?
For me, it wasn't really at the time. I don't think I thought about the financial aspect of it. I was a teen mom. I had my first child my senior year. I got pregnant my 11th grade year and went to school like for maybe a couple of weeks. And then my first child was born during my senior year. Thankfully, that didn't throw me off. I still graduated high school on time and went to school that same fall. But I don't think I was focused. I really don't. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with myself. And so I left the university and went to Columbus Tech and pursued cosmetology. And I think I was still trying to figure myself out, is why I didn't finish.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as much as I would love to say that it was finances, because that puts like that bow that everybody kind of thinks about in terms of how expensive college can be. But it really wasn't finances for me that really had me to sort of all these stops and starts when it comes to college. It was just life things that were going on. And to be quite frank about it, I didn't truly appreciate the the weight that a degree could carry. In my field, it really is not one of those things that everybody has to have in order to be successful in it. So I met so many people who did not have a degree. And so it wasn't one of those things that sort of stuck out there where you need this in order to get to here. Like I said, I just had to get to a place to where I wanted it. And that was the biggest driver for me. Before it was just more, this is the thing that you need to do. So finances really didn't play that big of a role in terms of how I saw college. Now I would have a quite different, way of viewing the cost of college and the impact of it. I do see that now a lot different than I did, when I first got started.
So is it safe to say that finances did not play a role because of federal loans?
Yes, I could easily say that. Yeah,
Yeah.
you didn't have to come out of your, I mean, I did not have to come out of my pocket for my education. Um, but so yeah, I mean, if I did, I'm quite sure I would have thought about it more and perhaps would not have sought after it in the way that I did once I started to go ahead and say, let me finish this up.
What about you, Cassandra?
I would say the same. Like I said, I was a mother at a young age, so um, the finances were there. I would say, had I been focused enough in that moment, I think maybe I could have finished and during that early time. But I think I was just a little bit, you know, unsure of what I wanted to do with myself, and just decided to take some time away from that, and then ultimately decided to do something different.
So when you first started school or when you decided to just continue school, looking back, what is your relationship with student loan debt initially? Is it just like there is an available $3,500, $4,000, I'm assigned this piece of paper to get it? Or is there like someone sitting down and some type of like with you to explain what's going on in some type of long-term view? What do
No.
you did you think about student loans at all? Because I know my experience with school was that like I knew that the funds were there. I didn't think about student loans at all, right? So it was just kind of like I want to go to school. I'm gonna go to school. There's $4,000 for me to do it.
For me, I did not have any guidance. So yeah, no, when the student loans were available, again, I looked at it as an opportunity for me to pursue my education and utilize the student loans to help make sure I was able to take care of myself and my responsibilities. So, having a child kind of made that money a little bit more intriguing. I had bills to pay because I had my own apartment. So it was, I looked at it as a way for me to go to school and still maintain my responsibilities. So, but as far as guidance on student loans, no.
Hmm. I mean, Cassandra's right, because at the end of the day, I mean, I've said this before, it is the only loan to which you really don't have to have a whole lot of, you don't have to have a whole lot of things going on in order to obtain it, right? I'm a student and I want to go to school, so therefore sign here. And I think the idea of that has you to think of it not so much as debt or as a true loan that you're getting, but more of, it's just an aside or it's just something that comes with going to school. It's the
Yeah.
conversation around it just seems like it's all merged into you do this because you're going to school and not that, wait a minute, you need to really think about this. This is a loan. This is, you're going to pay this back. And I'm not sure at my younger age, if you had explained that to me, what decision I would have made. But I do feel like I would have been a lot more prepared for what I'm experiencing now in terms of, it's truly considered in my, in my little bucket debt. And
Mhm.
that's a different relationship with what I currently
Mhm.
have than what I thought about it when I first entered into it.
Yes, I think there's a very interesting way in which like this can be perceived as an opportunity as opposed to, what it is when they come calling for it.
Yes.
So I guess that would be my next question. What was that reality like the first time you received a notice that there was some form of repayment necessary?
I don't think I thought much about it. I'll be honest. I don't think I thought much about, okay, if I don't start paying, this is what the outcome is going to be. Again, I was so young. I
Yeah.
don't think I really thought about what that would be.
Yeah. I,
Um,
I
I
agree.
don't think I gave much thought
Yeah.
to that.
I agree so much with that because that is so true. I mean, the idea that I was taking out a loan, or I'll say it this way, the idea that I am now going into my 50s and I'm just now to a point to where I am seeing the value of where I'm at versus the loan that I had taken out. So all of a sudden before, it was like the loan outweighed the advantage that I received after I got out of college, or I'm out here and I'm trying to make things happen. But the loan was actually, the price, I should say, was actually more than what I was actually getting out of it. And so now, should it take that long for that balance to happen to where, it's like buying a car off the lot. Once you drive it off the lot after a couple of months, it's not the same car, it's not even the same value. So my education never matched up, or what I got out of it just seemingly never matched up with and so all of a sudden we get this payment now and I'm like, whoa, it's different. I just think it's so different. So I agree with Cassandra wholeheartedly on that. I didn't think much about it then, but I think about it a lot now.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I want to dive into the parenting aspect of this because I think it changes the nature of the loan in general. What was that like, juggling raising kids and going to school? And were you all working simultaneously, or what was your scholastic experience like with these loans being taken out to be there?
Initially, I did work. I was trying to balance work and school and parenting and their school, and I was trying to balance it all. But the further I got into my education, I started to realize that if I was really going to make this thing happen, because like I said, I went back to school this last time, but seeking a true change in my life. I was trying to really make some major changes, and I realized that if I wanted those changes to materialize in a timely fashion, then I really needed to really focus on my education. So I kind of started phasing work out. I started going part-time, then peak time, and then my time versus your time. And all of a sudden, like, nah, school is where I'm at right now. So then the loans started going up because I still needed money to take care of my responsibilities. So I was borrowing more money in order to be in school, take care of my kids, to make sure they had what they needed while I was trying to pursue my education.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the scenario of trying to raise your kids at the same time that you're trying to go to school, and quite frankly, you're trying to, for me, I was trying to, again, always evaluating on all fronts. You're trying to be all things, trying to be a good mom, trying to be a good student, trying to also be good at your job, because you need all of these things to make this thing go. And it was difficult. It really was. And were shortcuts taken? Of course there were. I mean, sometimes I gave more to the school than I gave to my job. And sometimes, I mean, why should you have to make those sacrifices? Sometimes I gave more, less to my kids because I'm giving more on the job, because I'm just, the demands of all of it just comes into play. And I think it's tough. It's tough. And the student loans were there. I mean, they were there to help in a host of ways, and compensating for what you could not do on the job, or the hours you could not get, because you got to be in the class, or you got to be doing
papers due, and
exactly.
So
you need
research to do. So
you need that gap. It was, I don't want to downplay the importance of having it, because it was needed. I mean, schools aren't free, which is, to me, the biggest issue of all, is that it costs so much. So you have to tap into that. But I think there's some things lost, especially for Black women.
And I'll say this, most programs aren't designed for parents.
No,
they're not designed for us. When I was at Columbus State, the department head for the psychology department, when I was trying to figure out which route I was going to take for my master's, because I knew going back that I had to have a master's because of the field that I was going in. There was nothing you can do in this field that made sense without a master's degree. And each program that I vetted, one of the first things they said was, you know, you might have to not work off the bat. We found that people who try and work and do these don't do so well. So that was always, you know, in the back of my mind, like, okay, this is the recommendation, regardless of whether it was psychology or social work. That was the recommendation from the school.
Yeah.
So I really like, okay, if I really devote myself to this, then that means I won't work. And how will I take care of my responsibilities? Okay, yeah, student loans, I can borrow more money to get this done.
Yeah. It's definitely the decisions that and choices that we have to make as women, but then as Black women, I just think it's, you know, it's just doubles down on it, because sometimes the supports are not there in a number of different places, you know, to assist us in getting through in a timely manner. We eventually get through. We got through, right? I mean, we get through, but it's the clock that's ticking that, you know, like takes us a long time to get through, because we are trying to balance so many things.
And I'll say, if it doesn't take forever, it takes a lot of blood and sweat so you're gonna sacrifice something.
Absolutely.
And it's either gonna be time or you're gonna have to sacrifice a lot on the front end. And that was the route that I took, and that's why I think the student loans I felt like it was my only option. I don't think I had any other option. If I wanted a degree, then I had no other way to take care of that. None.
Yeah.
And get it done in enough time for it to make sense.
Yeah. And see, and I had, because internet would have different challenges, right? Where I am working with other women who are, you know, they're white women, and they are living their life, and I won't call it their best life, but they are doing things and handling things. And I could not understand how I was so far away. You know, it was a gap between where they were doing and what I was doing. And it wasn't the educational part that had it, but they could do that and still go to school. It was like, how is that possible, where I am trying to, you know, manage 3 different things and trying to figure out how can I do all of these things? But, you know, they're going on trips. I'm like, how do you do that and take care of your kids and all of this stuff and still work and still take care of business at the same time? It was an obvious gap. So it's like, you know, you're trying to close the gap. It just took a longer time. Whereas during that time that I'm trying to do all of these things, they're doing all of those things and more. I don't sit back and, you know, and cry over it, but it is something in which I recognize, and it actually drove me even more, but it was there, and it was obvious that I would have to do it, you know, twice as hard. I have to go twice as long, but you get through it.
To get half as much, and that was the thing. It's like you going, twice as hard, and you're not there yet. You know,
Nope,
you're striving.
Exactly. You're striving.
But
yeah.
you have not arrived to where you can do this, do that, and take trips, and you know all these other things. It's like, you know, it's a more extensive process. It seemed.
Sure.
For us.
Yeah. It was interesting. Go ahead, Kevin.
No, that's an interesting to use that word again. I think that's an interesting breakdown, because the way that, like I said earlier, the way that student loan debt, and like you guys said earlier, the way student loan debt is often pitched at us is that it's an opportunity, and specifically how that looks for Black folks who are trying to make up a generational wealth gap, and also like a wealth gap between a racial wealth gap between Black and white folks. Is that like you graduate from high school, you go to college in this kind of cookie cutter scenario. You're blessed enough to be given money from the government, and you'll get your education, and then you'll start like a decent job, making a good bit of money, and you'll just kind of pay that money back. I think we talked about this very quickly, Olivia, at one point, but there's a point in history where this was a good idea, right? Like there's a point in history where like this made sense. At a certain point, it stopped making sense. So I know, Olivia, you were saying that you're just now at the point of being like, I can see I don't want to put words in your mouth, but see the effect of this in a positive light, or that like the money you make now, it make like the borrowed money not makes complete sense, but has its trade-off.
It makes me feel like I am not underperforming. And I hate to use that word, but it's the only thing that I can come up with, because when the debt is so high, and again, I never saw it, but when the debt is so high, it's like I'm not what I receive. Either I'm not utilizing it in the way that I'm supposed to, because I'm not somebody who should have that much debt.
Mhm.
So I mean, this is Cassandra's area. I don't want to talk about the psychological impact of it, but it does. It makes you feel like, how is it that someone who has this much in student debt is here in terms of, I'll put it this way. I couldn't get that money any other way. I would not at the time, at my younger time, I couldn't have gone to the bank and gotten that much money. They would have looked at where I'm at and they would have said, you are not where you need to be in order to get this kind of money. So now here I am close to 50 and I'm just now squaring up to where I look at that and I'm like, I can go to the bank and get that easily now. You know what I'm saying? Like why would it take that long for that number to become a number that I look at and I square up against, you know, and I don't close my eyes to? That's concerning to me, because that's a long time in my, you know, in my livelihood, that it just was this thing that was over my head, and sort of one of those things to where I was ashamed of it. You don't talk about it. It's there though, you know, and you know, you keep deferring it if you can, or you keep let me pay, you know, how much can I give you to where it won't, but the number never goes anywhere. It really didn't. So I think, if that makes sense, that's what I'm talking about. It's just, I'm able to now look it square in the eyes and reason with it. Whereas before it was not anything that I could reason with. I was just, it overwhelmed me that I would have something like that sitting out there.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I can relate to that. The finally getting to a point where you feel like it makes sense for you to have this much debt, even though it doesn't really make sense.
Exactly.
It doesn't make sense at all. But you can start to look at it a little bit with a squint and say, okay, I think I can see it a little bit now. Whereas before it was like, what, did I miss something? You know, I mean, because I'm looking at, you know, numbers like, you know, getting close to, did I go to med school? What, you know, what's going on?
Exactly.
And on top of all of these things, for me, I ended up taking on more debt because I had out-of-state fees. Georgia didn't at the time have an online social work program. They have a program where if the state does not offer what you need, then they have a compact where you don't have to pay the out-of-state fees. But because there were schools that offered social work on campus, none of them were in Columbus. Troy State hadn't opened yet. The University of Georgia, I think it is, was the only place. And I'm like, so you want me to relocate? I can't do that. I got 4 kids. What you want me to do?
Yeah.
So I got accepted into the University of Tennessee, but that came with a price, an additional price. So I'm like, you know, money's just adding up. And I was like, okay, one day, I guess one day.
Yeah.
And like you say, you defer it, you put it off, and you know, you do. And speaking of deferment, that's how maybe our Caucasian counterparts may have been taking those trips, because they seem to have been, the people that I knew were a little bit more knowledgeable about deferment. Oh, I'll just go and take another class and that'll put it on hold. You know, I was like, you did what? You know, they some of the people I knew, they knew what to do to alleviate some of the pressures. I was never educated on that. It was just by happenstance in conversation that I learned that that's how some people handle their debt. But again, not having anybody sit me down and talk to me about the ways of managing student loan debt, I didn't know.
Yeah.
If y'all don't mind me
Yeah.
digging into that a little bit, what does that look like when you say, I know it's not like something like, okay, all my debt makes sense now, but what does that look like? Is that like when you're saying I'm able to look in an eye and say, not even that this is worth it, but that this is an understandable situation, I guess. Are you looking at how you grew up versus how you live life now? Are you looking at how much income you have? Are you looking at um the particulars of the education that you have and be like, that was an experience I wouldn't trade? Like what specific thing has you looking it in the eye, if you don't mind me asking?
I think for me is pretty much what Olivia said. Like, you know, I can walk in a bank now, and if I need to borrow the amount of money that I'm in debt student loan wise, because of my education, my earning level now, all of that, I can see, okay, now, but before, like she said, I couldn't have walked into a bank and borrowed a fraction of that. My income didn't match up to what it would take to be in standing to
Yeah.
borrow that kind of money.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Go
just,
ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, and that's just one way to look at it. You know, of course, student loan debt to me makes no sense. It should not be as astronomical as it is. I think it shouldn't cost as much to go to school, period.
Yeah.
But given the fact that we have this and we've done this, at least now I feel like my income level has changed significantly enough that it kind of,
Yeah.
I don't know, makes it more acceptable, I think. I don't know.
Well, yeah, it's like I think I started thinking about it sometime many years ago. I started to really even consider my student loan, right? Just looking at it and taking stock of it and actually saying, okay, let me see how much I want to, start paying here. Or when I get the notice, here's where you're at. I wasn't shocked by the amount that they were saying, hey, you should be paying this month. But I think at the end of the day, it's like it's not so much that I look at it and I think it was worth it. I definitely do not, I am not at that point at all. And I sometimes do struggle with this idea of and again, this is how I see it. I struggle with the ideas like, should I have? Right. And in saying that, I then would be saying, did I need this? And because I'm not in any field to where it is something to which a box that I need to check, it is really more for, I got it, it's there. I announce it on my LinkedIn, but it is not something I have ever, even in applying for positions, needed to state that I got, that I have it. So and I think people like me who are we look at it and we begin to like, wow, political science was a great degree to have, but I enjoyed it. It's been real. But and that's the kind of thing that makes me start to look at the cost of education in a totally different way. Even for my kids, I think one of the happiest moments that I have is when one of them sent me a text and said, I'm good. I don't really, I just think the loans, I'll be good. I'll think about it. Let's see. But the fact that they even said the word, the loans, I'm not sure if that's something I want, just that conversation was, delightful. And then, of course, you have ones who just aspiring to go higher and higher. And the fact that they look at it in a way that at their age, I did not. I did not, right? I'm going to my child and saying, how did you find that little, how do you know that you have this much, that was a moment when I'm learning from them. So I think educating folks on even my own kids, they're learning a lot more about what this all entailed than I ever did. So I struggle with the idea of whether or not it's been worth it. Even when I look at it now, and even though I could, easily take care of it and things like that, it's just still, it's a struggle.
I know. I remember we spoke about how much more money for you could have potentially cost the government if you didn't have your degree. So that should just be the reason that they don't. That
They give it to me for free.
Right, just give it to
Yeah,
you, right?
I think
Like
I can
this,
get with
yeah,
that. Yeah,
exactly.
because
Just
I have
let
a
me get this
degree.
thing. Exactly.
Yeah.
The thing that we are now giving back to societies, the kids who are, who are in the trenches, giving more than they take. I mean, if the government could put price points on all the things that we give back, a free education would be a small thing in comparison. The cost of it should be. So I think they would actually get more by allowing it to be just that and not what they think they're going to get. I mean, I've heard people who have said, that's just student loan, that's just going to be with me all the way through. I mean, I'm taking it all the way through. I mean, I've heard people say that, and it's not, and it's, I'm not gonna. If the narrative changes, I could be one of those as well. Like, it'll go. But that's when people are saying that. That's kind of, like, it's funny, but it is like true. That it should be free. It should not cost this much. It should not.
Yeah, there is no way that education should cost this much. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I know I guess that's kind of a segue talking about the cost of education. And I know you both brought up that you have kids in college or who have been in college. Did they also take out loans at any point in time? Do you know? And if they did, was that something that you encouraged? Were those things that you had conversation about? I know you spoke a lot, a little bit to it earlier, Olivia, but just to kind of get an idea, did you feel like, I understand the weight of student loans on me, I'm not going to put that on them? Did you feel like this education is important here? I need you to get it. Where was your head at?
Is okay. So this is and Cassandra, I won't take long. I'll turn it over to you real quick, because this is a tales of two of how, when you have, I have 4 kids, and I know that the first 2 I raised quite different on this subject than the second 2. So it's like you have the first 2 and you're learning as they're learning, and because you're young and they're with you. So I definitely wasn't like, wow, don't do that student loan. That was not the conversations I was having. It took a while for me to get to a point to where I was really assessing the student loans that they were getting, and we were having collective conversations. Again, that's the first 2, right? And then now my younger 2, it's a totally different conversation, to where I'm quite enamored with the idea of, just trying to, in this phase now, whenever they talk about college, I'm looking at out-of-pocket costs in a way that I never even considered, right? With the first 2, and that's a again, I'm in a different place, right? So it's like I'm looking at, and I wouldn't want them to have that student loan, but for the first 2, it was definitely not a conversation I was having. Not at all. It's different now.
For me, with my first 2, it was a conversation. I was really, really, because that was right after my student loans had defaulted, because like I said, I was young. I didn't think about that, and I had other priorities. So one fateful day when I got the phone call, and the lady was like, hey, your student loans are defaulted. We can help you get it out of default. And I was like, can I go back to school? And she was like, yes. And I said, okay, sign me up. I'm good. Whatever I need to sign. From that moment, understanding the gravity of student loans and what it can do for your education in the future, it prompted me to start having conversations with my older children about trying to go to school and incurring the least amount of debt that you could possibly incur. And it trickled down. One of my children decided that college was not for him at this moment, and I had to really get my mind wrapped around that. That was really hard for me. Why? I don't know. I really,
Mhm.
really felt like, that was what he had to do. But I
Mhm.
finally got my mind right and was like, okay, we ain't gonna push that. But my youngest daughter, she has been doing well as far as um, earning scholarships. I mean, she's been doing really, really well. So my second
Yeah.
oldest daughter has finished college with minimal, like very little, if any, college debt. And my youngest is on track to finish in the same manner. My
Yeah.
oldest, she took on some again. She was the guinea pig, test tube baby, whatever you want to call it. So her experience in college was different,
Yeah.
so she did take on some debt. But the younger two that have one that's finished college has minimal debt, and my youngest is on track to
Mhm.
have minimal debt. It got real. I was adamant about making sure they
Yeah.
understood that you can figure out a way to do this. Stay home. Don't live on campus. Go to a local university. Don't go,
Mhm.
these different places. And so trying to keep them from being in that space where student loans
Yeah.
are such a big part of their life once
Yeah.
they finish school.
And you know, and I forgot to say this, but this is interesting too, because you're making me think about this part of it, and I know I've had conversations with my kids about it. Um, the funny thing about society is that you start your household income grows, so therefore they get less. So therefore
Mhm.
the school or the cost to you as a parent costs more, right? And I
Mhm.
remember that moment when I thought I didn't, and I know I took out student loans, but to be clear, when I took out student loans when I started to also compensate, like I said, for a gap, right? So my
Mhm.
me thinking they don't have a gap like I had a gap. I had a gap that I needed
Right.
to fill, so thus student loan. What I did not realize is that as I was growing and doing better, I was creating a gap. And it kind of unnerved me when I saw what they would get, from just regular grants. It was unnerving to me because I thought grants covered me.
Mhm.
Loans were additional, but grants covered life for me. Grants covered
Mhm.
education, right? It was the loan was just the to fill the other gap that I wanted it to fill, but not the schooling part of it. And so it's just interesting how the cycle just eats away, even as even as it does, or it says that I'm doing this because I want to do better, be better, get more kind of thing. But the more you get, the more more they start to take away from your little M&Ms on your plate. It's like,
Yeah,
okay,
and I think another thing too is the rising cost of university.
absolutely, absolutely.
That on top of the gap that you're creating because you're growing,
You're
so
doing
you're
what
creating a
you're supposed to do.
yeah, and then
It's
on top of
crazy.
that, the gap is even widened due
Mm-hmm.
to the cost of going to university. So it's just almost like, dang, did you really, you know, did it pan out the way they said it was going to pan out? Because they said the better you do, then you'll be in a position to help your
Yeah,
children. But sometimes you doing better hurts your kids when it
absolutely.
comes to grants and stuff of that
Yeah,
nature.
it's kind of it was really one of those things to where when it hit me in the face, I was like, wow, this is that just blew me away.
Yeah.
I noticed that you both said earlier that, Cassandra, you said you finished a master's program. Olivia, you said you were in one right now.
No, I'm actually on hold to that. I'm not really. It's not my. Education is not one of those things to where I have found I have found it in terms of this formal setting of going for. My job requires a lot of learning. I have to go places and do trainings and
Mhm.
things like that. So it becomes one of those things to where I am now one of those who look at the idea of putting a value on what I'm getting out of it. And so I'm still trying to assess if getting something like that would be of value in terms of my bottom line. And it is not squaring up right now. So I don't know if that's the direction for me in terms of just continuing that process. But Cassandra, go ahead.
Now, I am a master's level graduate, and I ain't doing nothing else. I am not seeking a PhD in social work. They can keep it because it does not add to my bottom line.
Mhm.
It will be more money spent out, but what I feel licensing is where it's at. And all you need to get the full level of licensing is a master's to get the clinical licensing. You don't need a PhD. So to me, it's more about, are you vain enough to really seek that title? Or are you planning to go to school and go to teach at a university? I have no plans to do that. So it just does not really fit, for me to even consider going back for any other education. It doesn't make sense to incur those debts or pay that kind of money out of pocket. When I'm here, I've arrived.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
arrived. So I'm not leaving to go figure something else out.
Yeah, it's hard. It is very hard because you meet people, especially in my career field, because I'm in marketing and I'm in sales and I'm in an industry to where you meet various kinds and you go out and I have people sitting next to me who are, well north of 300, K in income, and they're BA in arts. And it's like, it's not, you know what I'm saying? It's like you're just talking to folks and then you begin to say, is that something I would need to want it? And that would need to be the reason why I want it. It cannot be for any other reason at that point. And sometimes that's all you need, right? Is to define, do I really want this? And I'm grateful to be in a position to where that's my decision process, which is what, Cassandra is talking about in terms of, her PhD. It's like, it would be a matter of want and not something that's going to, hit that bottom line. We've gotten smarter.
Yeah. And I literally I spend a lot of time talking. I spent a lot of time talking some of these interns, people who are really just finishing up their Masters of Education in either in social work, especially, out of going to school to get a PhD. I'm like, first of all, really research what that's going to add to you.
Yeah.
Please look at what it's going to add and then determine if that's something that you really want to pursue. With all the time that you're taking to pursue a PhD, you can get certifications that will add much more to you.
Agree.
At a lower cost and in less time. So it just doesn't, in my field, and that's another thing people have to really consider.
Your field. Yes.
Your field. What is required in your field for you to be successful at the level that you want to be successful at?
Absolutely. And how you define success, right? How you define success, right? And that's, and even as we were talking about kids, that's one of the things to which, even with my own, is for me, it's just a matter of them understanding, how do you define success? What is that to you? What does it look like to you? And then you start to sort of mark your territory in terms of how you go about obtaining that success. Because this does not, one size does not fit all. And even within my own industry, I have seen enough and been around enough to recognize that you definitely got to know for yourself what you want and how that success looks for you.
Well, that's good. Y'all answered my question before I asked it. I
What's that?
I also like to ask, this is a whammy, but would you do it again? All things being considered, you have to go back in time, still get this degree, still take on this debt, still be in this situation, would you do it again?
For me, yes. That's hands down, yes. I really changed my station in life
Mm,
Mhm.
by getting my degree.
yeah.
So yeah, all things being the same. Now, if Georgia get their life together, then I might go to a different university without all these out of state fees.
Yeah.
But yeah, all in all, yes, I would.
I could easily say no.
Mhm.
All things being the same, I would I would have, if I could go back, I mean, all things being the same, meaning I would have probably made the same decisions. But if I, for some way, had a better approach to things, I would have sought after really honing in my skill set within my career field. And for that, no need for me to enter into the university system. The structure within companies that I've worked for, they have so many training programs, so many ways for you to really grow and be challenged by some, what we would call now, we have these master classes. Well, I've been to my fair share of master classes within my own industry, and the nuggets and the things that I got from there, I could easily walk into, any place now and represent and do what I need to do. So it doesn't balance out to where it's really, been something to where I can look at and say, yeah, I would do that all over again. I took so much energy and time being in a space and trying to obtain a thing, that if I could bottle that up and put it where it needed to have been, I would be so much further along now than I am, and definitely not in debt. So, so there
Yeah.
you have it. I wouldn't even be in debt. And no one, it's not something that I even have to speak of. I have yet to be in a meeting or in an environment where I have been asked what school you went to and what degree do you have. That is a rarity for that question to be asked. I have more people who ask me what sorority I'm associated with than they are, that kind of stuff gets asked more than the actual school or education that I obtained. And I got a number that sits beside it that boggles my mind. So no, I would do it quite differently if I could.
Well, my degree is often asked about because of the field I'm in. So it's
Mhm.
Yeah.
truly, it truly aligns with your field,
Absolutely.
whatever your field requires. That's hands down.
Absolutely.
It's just the way things are,
Yeah.
depending on the
And
field you're in.
yeah. And I like that. You
Mhm.
can go to, I mean, like I said, I go to places, I'm in conferences, I'm talking to people, and most of the questions that I get asked about have absolutely nothing to do with your formal education, but so much as, what type of understanding you have about, helping a particular practice grow their business and marketing. Those are the questions, and those are the things that I've had to be educated on. And the degree that I have doesn't lend itself to assisting in those conversations. But all the places I've been, all the things I've done, all the education that I've received from the supports that's within the company that I work for has. So it's like, it's hard to square that up with me doing it over again. I just don't. And the pressure of going to school too, because and again, as Cassandra said, it does depend on your field for sure, and everybody's got to know what's right for them. But there was always this pressure of, this whole idea of going to school because you want your kids to go to school, and then you want their kids to go to school. It's like go to school. I have met so many young folks now to where this virtual education that they are receiving now, the things that they are receiving outside of being in a classroom now, it's mind-boggling to me. And I interview some of these folks who are like I did a semester or two, and then I realized this is something that I was supposed to be doing, and they're going for it. And I like that. I don't tell people not to go to school, but I like the fact that kids now are making different kind of choices than what I was brought up to think one would make, right? So it's just interesting how things have changed.
Have there been any personal and financial goals that have been like set back because of the loans that you take on, because of the debt that you have?
No,
Yeah.
not for me, because I never, because it was, the thing about student loan is that as long as you pay something, they're all right with you. They check a box for you, especially it's the federal loans, right? I don't have any private student loans to where the debacle of 2008 impacted me, where folks were really, those private loans where banks were going after, folks and really upending them, their livelihood due to student loans. That was a serious thing. And a lot of people were going through that. And I know some of those folks who were going through that. I didn't have that. It was not something that hit me. My loans are federal loans. And of course I respect that process. And I do, always want to be in good standing with them and pay them back. But there are things that are available to help you stay out of, the being in a bad place with them, if that makes sense. So that it hasn't hindered me from being able to obtain much of anything, as long as I stay in good standing with them.
Yeah, I agree with the good standing thing. Also, I got to research this a little bit more, but I did get a little bit of anxiety about the fact that I think there was some talk about no matter what your standing, if you carried a lot of student loan debt, then it may hinder your ability to get a home or, get a loan for a home. So that gave me a little bit of anxiety, but
Yeah.
all in all, it has not really affected me in that way because
Yeah.
of the way I purchased the home I currently live in.
Yeah.
It didn't have an effect on me.
And it's not you're able to, you're not as fast as some, but as the income begins to grow, your debt to income ratio just starts to really look a lot more respectable. Is that part to where you're just not there yet? I think that was the thing that always got me. My late 20s and my early 30s, it's like I'm looking at this number and it's like, how in the world could I be in this much debt? And here's where my number is. Here's what my income level is at. It was just not matching up, that it had all been worth it for sure. So not that it even matches up now.
Going back to my 20s, it did. It hindered me from going to school once I defaulted. I wanted to go back to school much sooner than I did, but I was already in default because I couldn't afford to pay it, and I didn't attend to it and get it deferred, do all the things. I guess I was just so caught up in life, and being young didn't help because I didn't handle that the way I could have, or didn't know to handle it the way I should have. I'll say that. Didn't know to. And then once they defaulted, that prevented me from going to school when I wanted to. When I was ready to return to college, I couldn't because I had to figure out how I was going to get these loans out of default. And like I said, it was by the grace of God that that lady called me. I was working in a barbershop. I was in the middle of cutting hair. I want to say I just finished a haircut. And the lady out of nowhere called and was wanting to talk about reconfiguring my loans, and that would get them out of default. And like I said before, my first question to her was, would I be able to go back to school? And it was in that moment that I realized, okay. And that's why I think I pushed so hard when my daughter went to college, my oldest daughter went to college, about her being mindful of what she's getting into. And then subsequently, when my other kids started going into college, student loans and understanding the gravity of them was really talked about a lot, because I had experienced what they could prevent if you
Yeah.
don't handle them the right way.
Okay. Well, thank you both. This is the final question. I really enjoyed this conversation. I can't, stress that enough. But what would the goal here with our petition with this campaign is to get $50,000 of student debt forgiven, specifically by focusing on Black women like yourselves, because Black women tend to be in the most dire situations when it comes to student debt. Black women are more likely to default than anyone else. And as I said at the beginning of this conversation, Black women with children are more likely to borrow more than white parents with children. The numbers are just kind of astronomical in that way. So, what would that $50,000 worth of forgiveness? How would it change your life? What would it do for your life?
Go ahead, Cassandra. Nothing for me, really.
Uh,
I mean, I just don't even have an
as
answer
far as-
for it.
I've thought about it, and sadly, I wish it would do more. I wish that, and I know that sounds really sad, but when you're talking in terms of student loans, 50,000 ain't a whole lot of money, especially when someone has, it really won't have that big of an effect on the bottom line of my student loan debt. I wish that there were talks about perhaps $50,000 now and then $50,000 another time or something. But in all honesty, I think student loan debt, the average person that has student loan debt, $50,000 is probably it's not gonna reflect a big difference right away. It may be sometime down the road before they're able to realize the effects of that,
Yeah.
but and that's sad because that's $50,000. That's a nice little chunk of change. But sadly, in terms of student loans, it doesn't weigh as much, I would say.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have a lot there. I mean, I agree. I think my hope, however, is that if you times 50,000 times all the people that are end up getting hit, that number will resonate with people to say, why in the world are people in this much debt over education? It literally just doesn't make sense. I mean, from an individual level, I agree with Cassandra, and that's why I was like, I don't really have anything. I mean, the 50,000, it's like, it'll be there, but I don't even know if that'll change my monthly payment, quite frankly. But I do think that hearing that number times all the people that have student loan debt, and for this country to begin to think about it in terms of how much we're spending or how much we are placing on the backs of folks to just simply be better, right? I mean, just simply with this thought of this moment will make me better. I think, quite frankly, it'll take the pressure off of folks who in my estimation are probably, want to go to college, but, are deciding not to. But at the same time, those who, like, I now have a choice of whether or not I want to go. It's not a matter of finances. And I think that in itself helps people to make better decisions about their future when they're not doing it under that umbrella, right? So I would say that it'll be nice to have 50,000 come off of the overall number, but overall I hope it's impacts everybody, and so they can see.
Yeah, and yeah.
I think that's that's an incredible. I think you both have given incredible things to think about, because I think your stories are unique personally, but also generally important, because I think they'll reflect so many other people's stories. Olivia, you saying that you took on a lot of student debt and then realized that your time and energy just could have been focused somewhere else, and you would have been in a better position later. And then Cassandra, you saying that the student debt, like taking on the student debt, helped you change your life, but it was so much that that now even like something like $50,000 worth of forgiveness wouldn't make that big of a dent in it. And it just kind of feels like two different conversations that are apart. Earlier I said a crisis within a crisis, but those conversations are a crisis within themselves. This idea where we're saying you got to go to college and college will make everything better, and then that's the case. And when you look at it from your point of view, Olivia, it's like, well, college was just kind of an additional cost that didn't make everything better in the way that you're suggesting it did. And when you look at it from your point, Cassandra, it did make everything better, but it was way too expensive, you know?
Yeah.
So I just thank you guys for this.
Yeah.
The reason that we're doing this is because Black women have stories like you two have. I would love to, if you do not mind. They were talking to me earlier and trying to get folks to be interviewed for the organization that we work for. I would love to give you guys names to the young lady Catherine, and she would call you and interview you. It wouldn't be as long as this conversation, obviously, but like I said, I think the stories are unique and purposeful and could go a long way in connecting with folks. So if you're open to it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I am very much so. I mean, I like the idea of what they're doing for sure.
Yeah, me too.
Sounds
Cool.
good. Yeah, thank you both. We really appreciate it at 1,000 Women Strong here. And I hope you all have a good rest of your night.
All right.